Fortnite collabs with everything these days, and DC loves making sure Batman is always the center of attention, so I really wasn't surprised in the slightest when he and his fellow Gothamites were added to Fortnite. Quite a few times, actually. The first being his comic version alongside Christian Bale's Batman in order to celebrate his 80th anniversary. And then a couple years later with some Fortnite original designs for himself, Catwoman, and Deathstroke. These new skins and bundles were accompanied by a crossover mini-series in which readers could find early access codes for these cosmetics in each issue, which is a really solid incentive to pick up what many, myself included, assumed would just be a half-cashed ass grab. I don't know which is more shocking to me. The fact that a crossover comic with Fortnite of all things turned out as good as it did, or the fact that said comic was better than all the mainline Batman stuff coming out at around the same time, while still being 100% canon to those same comics and the ongoing Fortnite storyline. So let's get into what makes this so good, shall we? You guys know how it goes around here at this point. Who's our duo for this match? So, first up we have writer Christos Gage, who I've actually been following for some time and didn't realize just how expansive his career is. I mainly know him from co-writing the likes of Superior Spider-Man and the first Spider-Verse, but he's also written comics like the first Deadshot solo book and also has a lot of TV experience, writing for shows like Law & Order SVU and the first season of Daredevil. Yeah, that Daredevil. And art duties are done by Riley Brown. I don't really have much to say about him since this is my only exposure to his work. He's done a few scattered issues of various comics over the years, mainly Deadpool related, as well as quite a few digital exclusive works for Marvel's Infinite imprint. I'm really surprised he doesn't have a larger body of work. Even his entire Wikipedia page is short enough to fit on my phone screen without compressing anything, which is really wild to me because his work here is fantastic. What I really respect here is that everyone involved took this assignment seriously and treated it with respect rather than just throwing their hands in the air and saying, "Oh, it's a crossover with the kids game, who cares?" Neither Gage or Brown were all that familiar with Fortnite lore, so they both got a crash course straight from Mr. Fortnite himself, the CCO of Epic Games, Donald Mustard. Evidently, this whole thing was his idea and specifically asked for it to be a Batman crossover due to being a huge Bat fan. So, he gave Gage a history lesson on Fortnite lore, even stuff that hadn't been revealed in the game yet at the time. He's also a story consultant on the comic and even did some variant covers for each issue. I have my grievances with Batman constantly being the center of attention, but I can really respect it in this case. He requested Batman be the focus since he's a fan of the character, which is perfectly valid in my eyes. Both Gage and Brown even put in a fair amount of time playing the game, making sure the vibe is right, so you see plenty of references and landmarks from the current season at the time. It's also just really funny imagining this comic creative team navigating the island and also being terrible at the game for research purposes. But enough about all the behind-the-scenes politics, let's get into the story itself. So, a 0-point rift opens up above Gotham, which is obviously bad, and Batman immediately determines it's not something that originates from this universe. But he doesn't have much time to contemplate what that means as he's kicked into the rift after seeing Harley Quinn nosedive straight in. He's immediately thrust into the utter chaos that is your average Fortnite match, and immediately realizes he can't speak or remember anything about who he is or where he came from. This ends up going about as well as you'd expect from someone thrown into their first Fortnite match and immediately gets wiped out by the storm. This leads into the best part of the comic as a whole. Even when he's stripped of his memories, resources, and prep time, he's still the world's greatest detective, despite what Fishstick here says. He's been here for God knows how many loops and somehow figured out that objects don't reset, so he can set up a base and leave himself notes. Like Memento, but with more Batman. He even managed to convince Catwoman to work with him since evidently emotions still carry over into the loop somehow. So they don't remember each other, but just know deep down that they matter to one another. And as such, we get a montage of the two working together to escape the loop, and you really get a sense of how deeply these two care about one another. Batman even lets himself get killed just to ensure she escapes the loop. Truly, true love is sacrificing yourself so your partner can get that #1 victory royale. And this comic unironically makes you care about this relationship more than Tom King's entire 85-issue run in a 12th of the runtime. What was it GodzillaMendoza once said?
How easily you were showed up by Fortnite of all things.
Ah, that's right. Thanks, Xavier. This comic also has surprisingly good action scenes with an entire issue devoted to something I didn't know I ever wanted. Batman and Snake Eyes going toe-to-toe. and they're so evenly matched that they continue to fight match after match, and it's just so epic that everyone else in the loop just stops fighting to watch these two brawl. Which honestly, yeah, I would too. They even wind up forming a mutual respect for one another since emotions transfer over even if the memories don't. This all climaxes in the two of them being the last in the match, and Snake Eyes willingly let himself get caught in the storm so Batman can escape the loop. Batman and Snake Eyes growing to respect one another after a series of epic fights sounds so fanficky, but man, the execution makes it so cool. And with that, he does manage to break out of the loop and into the next layer, for lack of a better word. The good news is that people can actually speak in this part of the Fortnite verse, and he caught up to Catwoman. Bad news, though, is that she's being held hostage by Deathstroke, my favorite mercenary who's not allowed within 1,000 feet of a school. But it's all good, just a wacky misunderstanding since everyone's constantly fighting each other in this universe. But our two love bats meet up with a group of fellow would-be escapists who also found their way out of the loop, and Batman immediately does his Batman thing to assert his authority over everyone. No one questions him after this, which tracks. Would you say no to this face? And after doing some sleuthing, they determine two things. A, none of this is natural and being controlled by an outside organization. And B, that one of their own is a double agent, which they find out after Fishstick gets killed in action. Oh man, Jason Momoa is going to be livid when he hears about this. This is significant because outside the loop, death doesn't get undone, and it's definitely murder, which is why Bats makes sure to enforce his rule on the group, incapacitate any resistance they see, but don't kill them. This really goes to show that Gage understood the assignment. A massive concern at the time was turning Batman into a gun-toting FPS protagonist, and Batman using guns was never even a question that was asked during his prep work to work on this comic. But no, he never so much as touches a gun in this and finds creative ways to come out on top. Even without the memory of his parents, Batman still values life above all else. But anyway, the traitor turns out to be Fishstick! Oh wait, no, he's dead. No, it's obviously Deathstroke. It was never going to be anyone else. Luckily, he was given some kind of gadget to prevent memory loss. Otherwise, hiring a mercenary to sneak into the island would have been a massive waste of their time and their money. But it's not all doom and gloom in here. Our group of oddballs does manage to find how they've been grabbed from their respective home universes. The cause of the rifts that appeared and sucked them all into the loop, the titular 0 point. The good news is it can also return them home, they just need some kind of conduit. An item or even another person to focus the 0 point into opening a rift to a specific universe. Otherwise you end up like Voyager here and get split into God knows how many fragments of yourself, sent to random universes for all eternity. Good God, that would be terrifying if this wasn't Fortnite. Hey, at least he gets to explore bold new worlds for the rest of his existence, which is what he always wanted, so good for him, I guess. But yeah, Deathstroke strands them here and goes back home. His work here is done, so they can't use him to get back to their universe. But luckily Batcat has another option, one Harley Quinn, who, as you may remember, dove right into the rift with zero regard as to what was on the other side. Only problem is Harley doesn't want to go home. She's happy just endlessly fighting and flossing here. Mostly the flossing. She does a lot of flossing. But they don't care about consent and knock her out and use her as a conduit anyway. And by the looks of it, they do leave her there, so she still gets what she wants. Yeah, Catwoman starts getting cold feet about the whole thing, though. She's grown to like what they have here together and doesn't want to potentially throw it all away. She's scared whatever they may have been back home could ruin everything. And this is something that's been weighing on Batman too, but ultimately he has to get back. He doesn't know why, but subconsciously just feels he's needed back home. So they both return home, hand in hand, and almost immediately get their memories back. Especially their recollection of Tom King's recent run and the whole wedding fiasco. And needless to say, Catwoman ended up being right, and she leaves, saying they should have just stayed there. This actually made the wedding incident hit that much harder in retrospect than it did in its own story, and that's genuinely impressive. But hey, the day is saved, so mission accomplished. Or is it? But that's not all. We've got sequel bait. Revealing Deathstroke was employed by the combined forces of Lex Luthor, Sloan from the Fortnite universe's IO organization, and the Batman who tries too friggin' hard to be edgy. This sets up a sequel comic by the name of Foundation with the Batman who edges as the primary antagonist, which I don't want to get too far into today, but I'd like to share something fun I learned while doing research. So apparently the Batman who edges too hard gets trapped in the loop by the end of that comic, and a couple of years later, Fortnite does a soft reboot during their Big Bang season, which seemingly erases anyone and everything to start fresh. Meaning, it seems the Bat who edges was erased from existence in a Fortnite event. Genuinely. I think that's just beautiful. A fitting end for his kind. But yeah, I really didn't expect this comic to end up being as good as it was. And I think a large part of it is just playing the concept completely straight. At its core, it's a story about the world's greatest detective finding himself in a strange alien landscape with no memory or access to any of his resources. No one ever felt the need to have Batman or Catwoman loudly proclaim, "Oh wow, isn't this weird? There's a fish dude and a Viking here." We know it's a weird situation. We don't need it spelled out how weird it is, so we can just accept the situation how it is and move on. Now, I won't pretend to know anything beyond the bare minimum of Fortnite lore, but I do consider myself pretty familiar with Darkwing here, and this gets all the important parts of his character down. Batman still values life above all else, so even if they're all in a loop and still come back next match, it still hurts him to see someone die if it could have been avoided at all. And even if everyone comes back anyway, he still refuses to break his moral code for any reason. He never touches or so much as considers using a gun, and always non-lethally incapacitates his opponents no matter who it is. I'd also like to give props to the designers at Epic Games. Their original designs for Batsy Poo, Cat Lady, and One Eye the Unaliver are all really solid. I really like Bat and Cat's rugged survivalist vibes. Their armored designs don't really vibe with me quite as much in-game, but Riley's art does make them look pretty cool for the couple of pages they appear in. Deathstroke, however, is just about perfect. It is a little odd to me that he's got 2 swords in-game when I've really only ever known him to have 1. Not a complaint, mind you, just an observation on my part. His costume itself is great, though. Ripped straight out of the New 52 era, but with its own spin. Overall, it's a great look, but something, smells a little off. You knows what I mean? But yeah, that nose took some getting used to in-game. It's barely even noticeable in the comic art, though. He just looks how his mask has always looked, so that already fixed my one nitpick. And not to keep hammering this point home too much, but Christos Gage really made more of a case for Batman and Catwoman's relationship here than any mainline comic in nearly a decade, which is borderline dumbfounding for me. Either this man is an actual comic wizard, or there's been something seriously wrong behind the scenes at DC lately. Despite having zero memory of one another here, they both fall for each other all over again and are actually happy here. To the point where they both seriously consider just staying here and leaving their old lives behind. So when they do agree to go back and get their memories back, it's like having their hearts broken all over again. And this comes from a Fortnite crossover comic of all things.
How easily you were showed up by Fortnite of all things.
But yeah, if you couldn't tell, I really enjoyed this comic way more than I was ever expecting to. I wouldn't call it one of the best comics I've ever read or even one of the best Batman stories of all time, but it's just a really fun read, which I feel like is also really on brand for Fortnite as a whole. Not one of the greatest experiences out there, but just a lot of fun. So go ahead and give this a read if you want a fun Batman story that doesn't really need prior knowledge aside from the bare minimum. If you're wanting a good Fortnite story that just so happens to feature Batman, though, you'd probably still like this. It does have some decent lore tidbits and plenty of Easter eggs and nods to what you'd find in-game at the time. But what do you guys think? Did you enjoy this story as much as I did? Or am I just a bubble-blowing casual who plays this game way too much? Either way, sound off in the comments below. This has been Major Disaster signing off. Thank you very much for watching, and make sure to look away from your screen for at least 20 seconds to reduce eye strain.